I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about the oddities of life. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we believe that we live in our minds and not in the world. That means that the way that our minds operate, the way that we interpret the circumstances and situations of our life, determine the true quality of our life. And so as we change the way our minds operate, as we change the way that we think, our consciousness and awareness, we change truly the quality of our being. In our lives, we're all faced with stress, we're all faced with challenge, and so often the stress, the challenge, and the tensions of life are created because things aren't the way that we think that they should be. They're not the way that we think they ought to be. And so in the next few minutes, we'd like to talk about this concept and idea and how it is that we can improve upon the dynamic of our mind so that we are able to deal with the oddities of life and instead deal with the realities of the way that life truly is. And life truly does bring us challenges, doesn't it, Iris?
Indeed it does. And we can spend our energies in oddities, in the extraneous things of life, or we can spend our energies just taking care of things at hand. And when we do that, we're far more rested, at peace, and more pleasant to be with, aren't we?
We are. And so often, I think, when we think of the way things ought to be, we think of people and relationships, and certainly that's important, and we'll spend some time dealing with that in the program today, as we always do. But it's also the circumstances and situations of life that bring us stress in terms of the way that we think it ought to be. And one of the things that I think about so often is the dealings that we have in the work environment where the telephone rings and expectations are made upon us and people get short-tempered, that those things really stress us because we really don't think that phone ought to be ringing. Isn't that true? But in fact, it needs to ring. Yeah.
That's why we were there, to get our messages and to do the work that the messages bring through. A friend of mine said one time, I walk every morning for an hour because then I can face what the telephone brings. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're in the office for, to see what the telephone brings. But the way we take ourselves to the office would determine how well we face what that phone brings or what happens during the day. And so we consider ourselves the first thing in the morning. We can pray the first thing in the morning. And most people do, I think, each in their own way. And when they do, they're more at peace throughout the day. And whatever happens then, they don't put preconceived ideas onto it to say, well, it should be this and it should be thus, because they just take what comes and work with it and go on. Don't you think that's the way it works?
Absolutely. And of course, in New Thought, we believe that our thoughts are prayers. And so often people, especially from traditional backgrounds, think of prayer as a very structured thing, and certainly it is, and we subscribe to that. But in fact, we know that we are constantly praying through our thoughts. And of course, if we understand that and embrace that concept and reality, then we need to be really careful what it is we're thinking, because we're actually praying those things. And it is a very important process. And as you said, in the beginning of the day, it is incumbent upon us and really strengthens us and empowers us if we become conscious and really give thought to the fact that this day, as in every day, that this day, things are not always going to be the way I think they should be. And I think that we all need to remind ourselves of the wonder of and the mystery of that wonderful truth and lesson, that things are not going to be the way we want them to be, we think they should be, and it's really a good thing that they're not always the way that we think they should be.
Well, all of us love surprises, and children especially love surprises, and if we resonate to the child within us, we enjoy those surprises. So we might look at life, the things that happen throughout the day as, oh, this is a pleasant surprise. And we can think early in the morning, may I have many pleasant surprises today. If we have that mindset, we're not going to be as disappointed when change happens and when something unusual and new occurs. And our first thought too often is to reject that new thing, and yet we love surprises, so we're a dichotomy, and we can know ourselves and know then how to react to circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And we need to look within, do a little self-evaluation periodically and assess how it is our mind is responding to the circumstances and situations of life. One of the things that we talk about, which is very basic and fundamental, is whether or not we're a positive or a negative person, whether or not our mindset, whether the dynamic of our individual mind sees first the positive, or first sees the negative. And of course, the best way to look at that introspection from an introspective perspective is to look at it in times of difficulty and challenge, whether or not we're seeing the negative in that experience, which is exactly what you just said.
Yes, and to look within is so important. And very often we don't give ourselves credit for being able to look within and truly see what is. And when we do and put credibility in our own abilities to know what's there and how to express it, then we're happier and more peaceful and content with life, and we're self-reliant.
Self-reliance is fundamental to the teaching, isn't it?
Yes.
And has nothing to do with taking away from the power of God. And I think in traditional teaching, sometimes people have a problem with our thought or our teaching. And one of the things that we say so often is we're not inviting or asking anyone to change their faith tradition or their religion. But in our tradition, that reality is very fundamental to the belief.
Yes, it is. And it's interesting how different people view Creator God. And some say, well, I wouldn't presume to tell God what to do with my life. And others say, well, God wants me to do what I need to do. And of course, we teach that God is within us and God is within every person. And so God manifests and expresses through each individual. And God gave mankind free will. So as we exercise our free will, we're bringing through the will of God to the best of our ability. And if we remember that, we're empowered because we realize that God is within us. At the same time, we realize that God is within everyone else. God is within all people. And the people we consider to be not too nice or, quote, evil, which we think is sin, well, anyway, any of those negativities, well, we can know that God is within that person as much as they are within that which we term good.
And that indwelling presence is real for everybody, regardless of what we do. And I think that important issue of the will of God is something that we talk about from time to time, and certainly when we're dealing with the oddities of life. So often people think that the will of God changes or the desires of God change for us at any given time. And the fact is that God's will never changes, and God's desire for any of us never changes, and that desire is good and only good. And so what changes is our way of thinking about our relationship with the divine and our relationship with circumstances and situations in life. And so often what we use in the teaching is that old cliche and statement we're so used to, let go and let God, but we say that's not enough because God has completed the work within us, has empowered and strengthened and given us every resource. And so we say let go and let God guide and direct us in the ways that we should think, the things that we should do, because it's up to us to change our way of thinking and to do things in accordance with divine law and to align ourselves with the will of God. So it's not God's will that's changing. God is unchanging. And we need to really be clear about that because so many people believe that it's God's will that this happen or it's God's will that that happen. And of course, theologically, different traditions get into the fact of what God permits and what it doesn't permit. And we're not questioning or criticizing any of that, but we're simply saying that from our tradition, there is not a belief that God or the infinite power of divine mind and intelligence ever changes. And that positive, affirmative presence is within each one of us and is always supporting us and always creating for us the resource to be guided and directed in the way that we should respond to the circumstances and situations of our lives. And so then the oddities go away because we understand that life's the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning point, I think, of embracing the concept and idea of taking responsibility for our own thoughts and taking responsibility for our lives. And that is to really accept and begin from the point that this is where I am. If we're at a point where we're in pain, we're in pain. If we're at a point where we have limit or lack, we have limit or lack. If we're at a point of depression, if we're at a point of sadness, wherever we are, that's where we are. And it's all right to be there. But from that point, we need to be guided and directed in how it is we can think differently about the circumstance so that we can see poverty or lack and limit as abundance and be guided and directed to our abundance, and so that we can move from the negative aspects of life into the positive aspects. But we are wherever we are at any given point in time.
And we are, but then we're never alone either. We're wherever we are, but God is ever always with us. And there are those wonderful ones on the inner planes of being who also help us. So we're not in this alone, we're in this together with a lot of wonderful help. And if we can become quiet, then we can sense that help. We can sense the angelic beings. We can sense our guardian angel. We can sense the other angelics. We can sense the spirit of the living Christ within us, or um, other modalities of religion might have one that they look to, but we're never alone. And that's so important to know, that we might be mired down in a lot of problems, but there's always hope.
Absolute hope. And centering ourselves, and we spend a lot of time talking about centering, and one of the things that we do so often is take Eastern and Western philosophy and bring them together. That's fundamental, again, to New Thought and to metaphysics. And so as we do that, this aspect of centering ourselves in the presence is really, it is a fundamental traditional Christian teaching, but I think so many traditional Christians are unaccustomed to the words, and certainly those from Eastern traditions and the more liberal traditions are very well aware of the centering concept. And we should probably talk just about that, because as we deal with circumstances that challenge us and perplex us and bring us stress, when we deal with the oddities in life, we really need to center ourselves, don't we?
Yes, we do. And if we do, we reap a wonderful harvest from it. And I was thinking, too, that as we look at other churches, other modalities of religion, the more traditional people come to our church and gain an extra. They don't replace their religion with what we teach. It's an extra dimension that's added to traditional religion, and I think that's important to remember.
Right, and of course there are many people who are interested in the philosophy and the ideas that we share, and are able to integrate those very well with any faith tradition.
Exactly.
And what we're talking about always are universal principles, and we're certainly never negating anyone's faith or any tradition. That's not what we're about. And one of the fundamentals of this whole movement and the thought process is that there's no criticism of anyone, and there's no criticism or negativity that comes from us regarding any tradition or belief. Everyone is valid, and everyone has its place, and every one of its followers have a valid and useful dimension of spirituality. But as you say, by taking the principles that we talk about and we teach, they can easily be assimilated into any tradition. And this idea of centering and becoming one with the presence is certainly, and I think in traditional circles, even in today's environment, we see more of it with people entering with the interest in meditation and that centering dynamic.
I was just thinking of that. Some of the things we add extra is the being centered, centering ourselves, and we do it through prayer, through meditation. And as we do that, then we're more attuned to Creator God. And as we're attuned, then we're more whole. And a lot of people say, I just want to be a whole person. Well, we can't be whole if we're standing without spiritual input into our lives. And as we do that, then we're able to function, and the oddities just fall away, because we know that whatever is supposed to be is going to be, and so we accept that.
And that's the great empowerment, is that it's not that things have to change, it's not that challenges have to be removed, it's not that any negativity has to be eliminated from anything except our response to it. And so as we are able to respond positively and affirmatively to every circumstance and situation, and creatively and be guided and directed, then wonderful things begin to happen and our thoughts begin to change.
Yes, and then we don't say something ought to be or should and shouldn't, but we just accept that everything what is, and we can change what we wish to, and we can leave what we don't wish to have changed. But we are in charge then of our lives, and that's what people are so empowered when they know that they have control of their own life, and we each do. We give our power away, or we assume that power. And when we give it away, then we're shortchanging ourselves, and then we're living in the oddities.
And what we give away is that power through the dynamic of our mind, because the circumstance and situation is always either empowered or negated through the power and the grace of mind and mind action. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you could continue to study the ideas and concepts that we're sharing with you in your home.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about some methods that people could use to overcome the oddities of life. And the one that we talked about was centering and meditation. I think in the last half of the program, maybe we could spend our time talking about some very practical ways that people could give up the oddities of life. Iris?
I can remember a spiritual teacher saying, assume you know nothing, as she was telling us how to live our lives. And this was a great number of years ago. And you know, that's one thing that's never left my consciousness, that if we think we know it all, then we know very little. But if we assume we know nothing, then we have ever so much to learn and to add to the richness of others' lives. So that's one way we could do. And not try to exert our own power, but to just let things be, just flow with life and what life offers. And it doesn't mean just giving up on life. It means not trying to control the situation for others. And certainly we need to control our own lives to a great extent. That's what taking back our power is, and we need to do that. But it's not put our impressions into the lives of others and our expectations, but to let others live the way we would like to live. And I know that's simplistic and it's easier said than done. Too often we try to, we have the oddities of putting things on other people. And if we can just let be, then we're far happier and we have more energy to do the things we really want to do.
Mm-hmm. It's very important to let things be the way they are.
Yeah.
And a very important concept for our viewers to understand the difference in our teaching between giving up and giving in, because it may be misunderstood that what we're talking about is just giving up. And of course, giving up means folding our hands and saying, isn't it awful, and moaning and groaning. Nothing could be further from the truth when it comes to New Thought teaching. There is no giving up, but there's a lot of giving in, because we give in when we begin, and we think this is sound psychological practice, it's sound scriptural practice, it's a sound spiritual practice, that when we give in to the way, we give in to the point in life where we are, especially in the midst of our pain and suffering and challenge and difficulty, we give in to this is where we are, and now we move from there. And it doesn't have to do with giving up at all. It has to do with accepting the point of where we are, but not accepting where we are as the place where we want to stay, and also not accepting the way that we've been thinking or the way that our mind has been responding to circumstances and situations as the way we want to respond. And then we begin to see things in a totally new fashion. One of the things that we talk about, as you know so often, is the issue of the empty checkbook, and how we ought to celebrate the fact that we have empty checkbooks and that we have stacks of bills, because stacks of bills mean that we have houses and we have cars and we have utilities and we have these many wonderful blessings that we have. And having a checkbook means that at one point in time we had money, or we have more or less money. And so when we see those bills and we see that checkbook, not as that empty checkbook, not as a negative, but as a positive aspect of our lives, and understand that when we change our way of thinking about it, when we change our way of thinking about the bills, when we change our way of thinking about the empty checkbook, and understand that that's where we are, but that we want to be guided and directed to change our way of thinking so that we're able to meet our expenses, so that we're able to have the abundance of supply that we need. And we open ourselves as a channel between our mind and divine mind, which is the infinite presence of God, that will of God that we talked about. Then we're guided and directed in the things that we need to do so that we have the resources we need. And it applies to personal relationships, it applies to health, it applies to many things other than abundance. And we spend a lot of time not talking about abundance and prosperity teaching, only because we believe in the teaching, but we think so often people use that as a fundamental process of new thought, and it's only one small aspect. But it's very important for us to understand that as we shift our consciousness, as we change our way of thinking, that we change the quality of our life.
And we do change the quality of our life by our very thoughts. And when we have hope in our lives, and we can remember that Jesus said, greater things than I have done shall ye do, because I go to the Father. And that's a very important last part there, because I go to the Father, which means that because we embrace what he taught, then we have this extra strength that we can draw upon at any time. And of course, we read all those wonderful stories in the various newspapers and magazines that tell us, that show us where people have really had miracles happen in our lives. And little miracles happen in everyone's life all the time. We just don't recognize it as that. Isn't that true?
It's absolutely true. And the other aspect of miracles, which we could do a whole program on that, but from our New Thought perspective, is that miracles really are the outpicturing or the realization of the laws, the universal laws, properly applied. And so every miracle, and if we go to Scripture, every miracle that Christ Jesus wrought was in fact his aligning his consciousness, his mind, with the mind of God, and outpicturing or producing the demonstration of a universal law. And he said so every time he did perform what we call miracle. And so it is the right understanding of the universal principles and laws that make manifest what we have come to call miracles. And in fact, those miracles can become manifest and can become demonstrated in any aspect of our life when we become proficient at the ability to take those universal laws and principles, apply them to our thoughts, align our thoughts and mind with divine mind, and then these miracles take place only because they are the fulfillment of the law. And the law not being something that is telling us what not to do, but that is something that is empowering us so that divine principles can be created and made manifest in our lives.
And the laws tell us how it can be made manifest. And also we then have to supply our own brand of hope and love and charity. And as we live that way, then it's given back to us in great abundance. And so many people say, well, why should I do this or why should I do that to help others? Well, why should we not? And as we go through life helping others, giving a hand and lifting others, then we're lifted that much more. And as we do that, we don't put out on other people what they should do and shouldn't do. We just accept that what they're doing is their best. And when we do that, then we're living the life fully. And we're receiving our rewards, which is that's what it's all about. Is life is give and take. We give that we may receive, that we may give again. And as we do that, everything falls into place.
Absolutely. And it's that constant circulation, outflow and inflow, that creates the river and stream of life in all of its aspects, in mind, body, and spirit. And it's just tremendously important that people try this principle and try the principle of giving up the judgment and giving up the condemnation of the way that they think things ought to be, and instead embracing the reality of the life the way it is.
I remember one time in church you said, let's all not be critical of anyone or nor judgmental, and see how long we can do that. So I think most of us didn't make it to the coffee room before we had broken that. But it's fun sometimes. It's exciting and interesting to make a promise to ourselves that we're going to do or not going to do whatever it is we think are bad habits. And perhaps we don't even indulge in those very much, but it makes us more aware so we can set goals and limits for ourselves, but not for others, just for ourselves.
And as we do that, it gives us the opportunity to consistently go through this process of introspection.
Yes.
And consistently and constantly look at the dynamic of how it is that our mind is operating. And I think it's tremendously important. And so many of us go through the process of life without much thought, believing that our minds simply operate the way they do, when in fact our minds operate and our thought processes operate from the standpoint of all of the experiences that we have had and the translation of our lives in thought process over and over and over again in a repetitive nature. And so we can recondition those. And of course, affirmations and denials are a great way of doing that, and we use those widely in New Thought.
Indeed. And both of us have been leading meditation groups for many years. And I know over the years I've seen people's lives change, because if they start practicing meditating first thing in the morning, having the prayer and meditation time, and then having a time of retrospection in the evening, and that's been new to a lot of people who've attended the meetings that we've held. And it makes a difference in their lives, in our lives, and in the life of anyone who does that. Because for the prayer, for centering ourselves for the day, we have the prayer and meditation time. And then in the evening, the retrospection works wonders, showing us what would like to have done differently. But we don't do it viciously to ourselves. We just do it gently and just seeing. And that creates a mindset for us, and then it helps us. It's like somewhat like keeping a journal. And a lot of people don't like to keep journals because they don't want to put all that on paper, whatever is in their heart and mind. But as we do any discipline like that, it helps us see where we have been and where we're going.
And that is tremendously important for us to continually be looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
And we spend so much time looking at others. And of
Yeah.
course, in today's program, as we talked about the oddities of life, we look at the way others and the way circumstances, situations respond. But we need to look at ourselves always, and we need to begin over and over again from the starting point of analyzing and improving the dynamic of who and what we are in terms of our outpicturing and our demonstration of the reality of who and what we are as children of God. And all of us are perfect. As Buckminster Fuller said, some of us are just less damaged than others, and certainly many people are significantly damaged, and we need to understand that.
Yes, and indeed, we just need to look to ourselves and not critically look at others, but critically look at ourselves, and not be overcritical to ourselves, but accept that we're doing the best we can, and accept that life is good, and that we're offering good. And we need to be as thoughtful of ourselves as we are of others.
And I think it's an important concept as we end today to realize that all of us are doing the best we can. We all try to do the best we can. All of those around us try to do the best they can. But all of us are at different points in life with different experiences, and we need to have some understanding and some compassion one for another. We hope that the information that we've been sharing with you has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.